The first 2 pages of your sitcom pilot script are by far the most important pages you will ever write in your life. Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Punching Up with Sean Conroy. I am Sean Conroy. I am punching up. And today we are talking about cold opens, an essential part of any spec sitcom pilot, any sitcom pilot, any drama pilot, any episode of television has a cold open. And a cold open just means we're coming into this episode with no knowledge prior to that. It's particularly important in a pilot because we don't know anything about this show. If you're watching episode 263 of Friends, you know the characters, you know what's going on, you have some backstory. If this is a brand new pilot, which is what we are trying to write, you have none of that prior knowledge and you're coming into it and you're trying to establish certain things. So I want to talk about what you're trying to establish today, and I want to talk about some good examples of shows that do it well, and then I want to talk about why this is the most important part of your script. And hopefully this will all make sense. First, what are you trying to accomplish in your cold open of your sitcom pilot? Nobody's ever seen this show before. It's come out of your head. And in my mind, there's 3 things you need to get done in those first 2 pages. The first thing is you need to introduce me to a world in which I want to spend time. And by world, I don't just mean a place. I don't just mean, the show takes place in New York City. That's the world. Well, what part of New York City? Is it the finance part of world is it the incapable of speaking a sentence in English part of New York City? Is it I shouldn't have said that. Is it the finance part of New York City? Is it the artsy part of New York City? Is it uptown? Is it downtown? Is it a city? Is school in New York City? Is it the story of the people who work on the island that the Statue of Liberty is on? I assume that's called Liberty Island. I don't remember. Or is it the people who work at the display, the national parks display for Ellis Island? What's the world? Introduce me to the world. That's number 1. Number 2, and I guess because we live in a Twitter world, you're supposed to say how many there will ultimately be, so you know. So that was number 1 of 3. This is number 2 of 3. Is introduce me to the character or characters I will be spending a lot of time with. Who is important on this show? Who do I need to pay attention to? And for me, if I'm reading a pilot, not if I'm watching, and I hope your pilot gets made and people get to watch it, but if I'm reading a pilot, it helps me to really focus on one main character. Sometimes 2. I think a lot of people writing their first sitcom pilot, for whatever reason, gravitate towards writing a pilot that involves many characters. It's like, it's like an Agatha Christie whodunit. We have the butler, the maid, the candlestick maker, the butcher, the baker. All those people are suspects. And if I'm reading your pilot, it's just way too confusing for me to follow all those people right away. So start me with your main character, or characters if you insist. You're allowed to do whatever you want. It's your script. It lives in your head. So that is 2 of 3. So far we have what is the world? Who am I going to be spending time with there? The third thing that I think is really important in a sitcom pilot, maybe not as important in a drama pilot, not at all important in a drama pilot ultimately, but very important in a sitcom pilot is give me some jokes. Give me some good hard jokes. I want to laugh. I want to know right away that this person knows how to be funny. That is important in a sitcom, and I need that reassurance. And that is three of three. There's three things: the world, the characters, and the funny. Give me those things, and we're off. Um, okay, so I want to talk about two examples of cold opens in sitcom pilots that I love, that I think are great. And they have certain things in common, and then they have certain things that they do a little differently. The first one I want to talk about is the pilot for a television program called AP Bio. And you've probably seen it, or I don't know. I don't know you. I don't know what your television proclivities are, but if you haven't seen it, at least watch the pilot. In fact, watch both of these pilots before I even continue. Okay, go watch the pilot of AP Bio and go watch the pilot of Reservation Dogs, and then come back and we'll keep talking about them. So AP Bio right away introduces us to the world in like I think like two or three very quick shots. We see an empty hallway. Or sorry, we see a sign outside a high school that lets us know that we're in a high school. We see a quiet, empty hallway, and then we are in a classroom with a bunch of kids sitting silently, clearly waiting for something. And immediately we're in this world. We're in a high school, and it's not, there's a million different kinds of high schools. The high school that I went to is probably different from the high school that you went to. It was in the Bronx. It was all boys. It was a Catholic school. Everybody wore a jacket and tie to school. Did your high school have that? Probably not. People were rowdy, but knew that they could easily get in trouble from the adults in the school. This high school in AP Bio is not like that. It is very orderly and neat and well behaved. Um, so that's the world we're in. And we are maybe, I think, maybe 10 seconds into the show. And we are already oriented. And there's definitely a head start in a show like that because we all know what a school is like and we've seen a million different kinds of schools. So we're in a familiar place and we get the parameters right away, which is nice. And then as we watch these students sit quietly, one of them is reading a comic book, one of them is, or, sorry, graphic novel. One of them is looking at her phone. Sorry, her, yes, it's a phone. Um, all of a sudden we hear tires screeching and they all run to look out the window and we see a car crash into the sign that we saw at the beginning of the episode. And a guy gets out and is yelling at a biker. The two guys are yelling at each other. The guy pulls a crowbar out of his trunk as if he is going to attack the bike, not biker, bicyclist. I think that's a distinction that needs to be made. So he pulls his crowbar out of his trunk and he's going to attack this bicyclist. The bicyclist runs away, and the guy turns, comes into the school, and then all of a sudden the door bursts open. A guy walks in and slams the crowbar down on the desk, and it's the guy that we just saw in the schoolyard hit the sign. And clearly, all of a sudden, there is this chaotic element that has been introduced to the world. Now we get the introduction of the character. And in AP Bio, this is done with a monologue direct to camera to the students, ostensibly. He tells them who he is. The first thing he says is, I'm Jack Griffin and I don't want to be here. Um, so that takes me to the next issue, which is, are there jokes in this cold open? And I would say there are several visual jokes followed by some verbal jokes. Visual jokes being stuff like getting the crowbar out of the trunk, leaving the car where it has crashed into the sign as he comes into the school building. Like he doesn't care that his car is not parked and that he has not handled whatever needs to be handled as far as, I don't know, insurance and tow trucks and so forth. Um, so those are, I mean, your mileage may vary, but those are good jokes. And they're not even verbal. But then we get to, my name is Jack Griffin, I don't want to be here. And then he goes through a whole monologue of something that clearly is about subverting the tropes of the teacher sitcom. Whatever teacher sitcom that might be, whether it's Welcome Back, Cotter, where Cotter was friendly with all the students, even though they were difficult. He was clearly on their side. Jack talks about how he's not gonna teach them anything, and they're not gonna teach him anything. And I of course had to laugh because I didn't have to, I just did. Um, the one person show I did many years ago was about being a teacher, and it definitely had an aspect of like, this is what I learned from the kids by being there. Now this was long before I found out it was not cool to talk about that stuff when I watched AP Bio, but we get that this is not going to be your typical teacher student relationship, that he is a different kind of character, doesn't care about them, doesn't want to teach them anything, just wants to steal his rival's job and have sex with a lot of women. So it's funny. Or I think it's funny. And we are 2 minutes into the pilot. Just viciously executed, great cold open. Now, the second one I want to talk about is a little different from the first one, which is what you're always looking for, is not being the same as anybody else's cold open. But the second one I wanted to talk about, like I said, was Reservation Dogs. And we open Reservation Dogs in the dark with the sound of a radio being tuned because we are going to get to the local radio for the Native American reservation that the show takes place on. And we find out some information about a dance and some programming over the weekend. And meanwhile, we're looking at a drone shot of the reservation. And what we can see is that it is a place that is not doing particularly well. We see, when I say not doing particularly well, I mean financially. Like we see a bunch of trailers, we see a sort of rundown city hall covered in rust. We see some railroad tracks with a warehouse that's also covered in rust. The streets are so not busy that there's a couple of people riding their bikes directly into the oncoming traffic, which is one car and is clearly not going to hit them. But it sort of definitely presents this shambolic world. Is that the right word? I hope so. I mean, we'll see. Who knows? Who doesn't throw around words like shambolic? Then the next thing we see, well, we see one of the characters get out of bed, and then they are all in, there's four of them. Okay. So they are doing the thing I said not to do, which is open with a bunch of characters. And they obviously, you know, They do it very well. In production, all bets are off. When you have actors playing the characters, it's easier to do a bunch of characters because people look different from each other. Whereas if I'm just reading names on a page, there are certain similarities. And I know I say this over and over again, but I only say it over and over again because nobody listens. Anyway, there's four of them. They're all wearing bandana masks, and they are about to steal a truck. And that is okay. So we're in this world where money is not flowing. We're in a world of petty crime. Petty crime is apparent right from the beginning because they're stealing this truck that is even the truck itself is like I think they're called flaming flamers, like a terrible snack food, which feels like something you shouldn't spend money on. There's also a thing in, I guess it's in both of these, where in Reservation Dogs, we immediately start to hear called out by the radio station. The Stooges' "I Want to Be Your Dog" is sort of the track that plays as they steal this truck. And in AP Bio, just coincidentally, I didn't even think about this. In AP Bio, the opening credits song is the Ramones. So a lot of punk going on in these two shows. But they jump into the truck. Two of them bicker about putting their seatbelts on, whether that's cool or not. One of them is, as the truck leaves, is texting with her mother. So she's stealing a truck, but also involved in a text conversation with her mother. So clearly not just a lost criminal just yet. Um, the fourth one we don't totally get to know right away. We hear a couple things about I can't remember what his lines are. Something about the flaming flamers falling. We're losing a couple of bags or something like that. But we sort of immediately have a sense of each of these characters, which is important. And then, as I said before, the last thing is, do we have some good hard jokes? Now, in my opinion, the stuff about buckle your seatbelt, you can't, we're stealing a truck. Why would I buckle up? It's bickering, so it's not necessarily a hard punchline, but I do think it's character driven comedy because it immediately gives us this sort of sibling relationship between Bear and Alora Dana, which is important that we know how these characters feel about each other. In fact, that's another thing I would say about introducing more than one character as a main character right at the beginning of your pilot is, can you clearly establish the relationship that these characters have with each other? And they do that very well with those two characters. Um, but I guess as far as good hard jokes, you know, again, there's a couple of visual ones. There is the older man walking down the street, and then all of a sudden the truck goes by and they have been unable to get the ramp up into the truck, so there are sparks shooting out. And then there is the scene with the cop. They accidentally drive down the wrong road and they're going to get busted by this policeman who's very important on the reservation, but then he is too busy listening to a conspiracy theory about the assassination of John F. Kennedy and does not even see them go by. And they end up at the junkyard where they're going to sell the truck. And that's the end of the cold open. And again, we're 2 minutes in and we know lots about the world, lots about the character, and the fact that this is going to be funny. Um, I would also say that there are fewer actual jokes in the Reservation Dogs cold open, but there's also fewer actual jokes in the Reservation Dogs show. It's sort of a dramedy more than a sitcom. So they're setting a certain tone right away, which is true to the whole series. Um, so there you go. Two great cold opens. I would say, go watch a bunch of cold opens and see how they execute those things. How do they introduce us? How do they introduce us to the world? How do they introduce us to the main character or characters, if you insist? And what are the jokes they get to right away? Now, why is this so important in your script? Aside from the fact that every page of your script is important. This is a marketing tool that needs to be perfect start to finish. But those first couple of pages need to be even more perfect, need to be even better than the rest of the whole script because that is the first thing that somebody reading your script will read. And you want to impress them right away. You want to make them feel like this script is worth reading. I look at it as those first 2 pages are like are like liftoff for a rocket ship. In that moment, the rocket ship is at its heaviest because it's completely loaded with fuel. And it's also the most susceptible to Earth's gravitational pull. So there needs to be a huge force expended to accelerate the rocket ship so that it can leave the gravitational pull of the Earth and shoot out into the atmosphere and beyond, to quote whoever says that kind of thing. Um, so those 2 pages are liftoff for your script. You want your script to achieve to achieve a speed of whatever it is, 17,800 miles per hour or however fast these rockets go. Talk to, somebody who's involved with rockets. I don't know, Neil Armstrong or Elon Musk, and they can tell you exactly what the speed is that you need to achieve. But you need to achieve that speed in the first 2 pages of your script because that will make it so that people will be impressed and keep going, and you will get the momentum of those first 2 pages and be able to get somebody to read all the way through. And part of the reason for that also is because if you're sending this to an agent or a manager or a network executive or a showrunner or a contest, you're not the only one. You're not the only script they're getting. They're getting lots and lots, and I would say even more than lots of scripts, big lots of scripts. Very inexpensive, free. They're free. That's why they're called spec scripts. So they're getting all these scripts, and what is going to make yours something they really want to read? And it's that cold open. So do that. Now, two other things before I go. One is if you're listening to this, you're obviously interested in writing sitcom pilots, and I think about that a lot. I teach classes about it. I write about it some. I do this podcast. Go to my website and sign up for my newsletter, which I try to be consistent with, and I completely fail, but that's what life is. It's not how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get up again, and you're never going to get me down. Um, Chumbawamba, right? So sign up for my newsletter and you'll know when I'm teaching classes. Sometimes I do free workshops, whatever. Here's the other thing. I watched the pilot of DTF earlier tonight. Um, and you know, we'll see what happens with this show. Uh, I'm not going to say I loved it, but I was very excited by it because it is created by, and the first episode was written and directed by a guy named Stephen Conrad. And if you don't know who Stephen Conrad is, he's done a number of different things, but one of the things he did was he created a show called Patriot, which I think was on Amazon and is one of my favorite shows of all time. And it's a favorite of mine because I, I feel like watching it, you just got to see Stephen Conrad's brain spread out on the screen, like all the things he was interested in and obsessed with and thought were funny and weird and worth discussing. And I was watching that pilot tonight, and there's just all these things that get introduced. You know, cornhole and American Sign Language and being a baseball umpire and uh, above ground pools. And, you know, you can just see that these are things that have stuck in his brain and he's trying to write stories that tie them all together. Um, what I think is great about the stuff that he does is, or that he did in Patriot, and that I'm sure he'll do in this, is that he puts all this kind of interesting random stuff in, but then it becomes really important. And I love that. So recommend DTF. I don't know what DTF stands for. If you know what that stands for, please send me an email, Sean at SeanConroy.com, or, you know, write a comment or do something. So there you go. Cold opens, the most important 2 pages. And it could be 3 pages. It could even be 4 pages. But shoot for 2. Get liftoff, you know, make it perfect. You can do it in 2. You're a killer. All right. We'll see you next time on Punching Up. Thanks, everybody.